I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
Queen Camilla entered the palace communications room expecting to approve the final version of the royal Christmas broadcast. Instead, she was told that her speaking segment had been deleted, her closing appearance had been removed, and the final program would present the king without her. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she pushed back her chair, demanded to know who had authorized it, and stormed from the room as stunned staff watched the doors close behind her. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla returned to the table only long enough to stare at the revised running order. The document, a page listing who would speak and when, carried the weight of her humiliation. Her planned introduction was gone. Her closing appearance beside Charles was gone. The Christmas broadcast mattered because it was the monarchy's most personal annual message, when the sovereign defined unity, duty, and reassurance for millions watching at home. Now the Queen Consort had been removed from that national picture. The senior communications secretary slid the page closer. She read it twice, searching for an omission that was not there. Her fingers tightened along the edge before she placed it down. "Who approved this?" she asked. No one answered. That silence cut deeper than any written order, because it suggested that everyone already knew the truth and feared saying it aloud. An aide explained that the decision had arrived through the private secretary's office, the senior palace department that carries the monarch's instructions and coordinates official business. The staff had not written the order. They were implementing it. Yet when Camilla demanded to know whether Charles had authorized the change, the official looked down instead of responding. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood, anger replacing disbelief. Then came the detail that changed everything. Catherine had already recorded a short message about children, service, and national resilience. The Princess of Wales had not taken Camilla's exact words, but she had taken the emotional place the older royal expected to occupy. Catherine would now appear calm, compassionate, and forward-looking, while the Queen vanished from the program. Camilla understood the insult immediately. This was not only about airtime. It was about who the palace believed could speak for the monarchy's future. She turned from the shaken staff and walked toward Charles's private office without returning to her rooms. Each step sharpened her fury. Camilla had been erased from the program in a matter of minutes, but behind the closed door ahead of her stood the people whose private loyalties had made that erasure possible. The decision threatened far more than Camilla's place in a televised message. It exposed a fracture inside the royal family that had been widening in silence. Charles faced a choice between protecting his wife and preserving the authority of his heir. William saw the broadcast as a test of the monarchy's future. Catherine understood that her smallest gesture could be interpreted as an act of replacement, and Camilla believed the family was quietly preparing for life without her. Charles remained alone after the corridor fell quiet. He opened the earlier draft of the Christmas program, the official schedule setting out who would speak and when, and found Camilla's name still printed beside his own. For years, the king had defended her place beside him, insisting that she was not an addition to his reign, but part of its foundation. Now one deleted line threatened to make every promise sound weaker. The monarch touched her name with one finger, then closed the folder. His tea had gone cold, but he did not notice. He understood why the moment mattered. The Christmas broadcast was not simply a speech. It was one of the few times the crown spoke directly to millions, without ceremony, standing between the family and the public. Every face included suggested trust. Every absence suggested judgment. William felt that pressure differently. The prince believed public confidence had become too fragile for the broadcast to carry private rivalry. He told Catherine that the message had to belong to the crown, not to anyone fighting for rank inside it. The future king had watched every family disagreement become national debate, and he refused to let Christmas become another contest for attention. Catherine lowered her voice before answering him. The Princess of Wales had learned that her recorded message would remain, and the news brought no sense of victory. She told William she did not want her appearance interpreted as one woman replacing another. He replied that withdrawing now would confirm the very conflict they were trying to contain. She heard the logic, but the discomfort remained. Camilla saw something darker. To the Queen Consort, Catherine's inclusion and William's growing influence looked like the beginning of an organized succession shift, a gradual transfer of public authority toward the next reign before Charles's own chapter had ended. Her removal no longer felt temporary, it felt like rehearsal. Charles knew why she would think that. Days earlier, senior advisors had warned him that placing his wife prominently within the address could pull attention away from its message. He had listened, he had hesitated, and he had never told her that objections had already reached his desk. Anne had seen the revised program too. The Princess Royal read it without protest and gave only a quiet nod. That restrained approval revealed something dangerous. William was not standing alone. Camilla believed the prince had pushed her aside, yet the true wound reached further back to a Christmas planning meeting, where one sentence changed the atmosphere forever. The crisis did not begin when Camilla saw her name missing from the schedule. It began 12 days earlier during a private Christmas broadcast rehearsal at Windsor. What should have been a routine review became the moment everyone later remembered as the point of no return. Before Charles could finish reading his message, his wife interrupted, questioned Catherine's inclusion, and demanded that the program identify her as the central female voice of the monarchy. The room fell silent. William did not. Charles had gathered the family and senior communications officials to review the final structure before recording began. The rehearsal was meant to settle who would speak, how long each contribution would last, and who would appear in the closing sequence. That sequence mattered because the final moments of the broadcast would show the public which figures represented the present crown and which ones carried its future. Camilla entered believing her place was secure. The Queen Consort was scheduled to introduce a charitable initiative and then stand beside the king during his closing words. Catherine had been given a separate message focused on children and community volunteers. The Princess of Wales was not replacing anyone, yet her calm contribution carried warmth, and that warmth made the older royal uneasy. Camilla stopped Charles before he could finish the next page. She looked toward the officials and demanded that Catherine's segment be shortened. Then she spoke the sentence that changed everything. The program, she insisted, must not present the princess as the woman already carrying the crown. Her words struck the room with brutal clarity. This was no longer an editorial concern. It was fear spoken aloud. William placed his script on the table. The prince did not raise his voice, but his restraint made the answer sharper. He said Catherine's service would not be diminished to protect another person's position. The future king looked directly at Camilla as he spoke, and she understood that he was not asking for permission. Charles remained silent. The king glanced from his wife to his son, but he defended neither. That hesitation wounded both sides in different ways. Camilla heard abandonment. William heard consent. Catherine watched the conflict deepen around her and quietly asked whether her entire contribution should be removed. He immediately told her no. Anne ended the uncertainty. The Princess Royal said the Christmas message belonged to the sovereign and the country, not to anyone searching for reassurance about rank. She spoke without anger, yet her judgment landed harder than William's challenge. Camilla left knowing the monarch's sister had chosen the future over her pride. That evening, the communications director recorded the confrontation in a confidential memo, a private written recommendation intended only for senior palace decision-makers. The document advised removing Camilla's individual speaking role before the dispute overwhelmed the king's message. The memo transformed an argument into policy, but when Camilla finally reached Charles's office, the conflict could no longer remain hidden behind schedules, advisors, or carefully edited scripts. Camilla entered without knocking. Charles was standing beside his desk when she placed the revised program in front of him and asked a single question. "Did you approve this?" There were no advisors in the room, no cameras, and no ceremonial smiles to soften the answer. The king looked at the page but did not touch it. His hesitation told her everything. What followed was not a disagreement over a speech. It was a reckoning over loyalty. The queen closed the office door herself and pointed to the blank space where her segment had once appeared. She wanted no careful wording and no palace language. The Christmas broadcast, the sovereign's annual message to the country, had already become a test of who still mattered inside the family. She demanded to know why her voice had been removed and why the decision had reached staff before it reached her. Charles tried to remain calm. He said the program had to focus on national service, continuity, and the message of the crown. The Windsor confrontation had changed everything. If Camilla appeared prominently after challenging Catherine's role, every newspaper and broadcaster would search for signs of rivalry. The king insisted that the speech could not become a public argument disguised as Christmas unity. Camilla heard only betrayal. She accused him of sacrificing her to satisfy William and protect the future king from conflict. Her voice broke when she reminded Charles how often he had promised that she would never again be left alone while the palace decided her fate. He looked away, and that small movement made the wound deeper. Charles finally lost his restraint. The monarch told her that the rehearsal had forced everyone to choose between protecting the program and protecting her pride. The words came too quickly. He regretted them at once, but regret could not pull them back. Camilla stared at him, as if the room itself had shifted beneath her. Then the truth became more complicated. Charles admitted he had authorized the revised broadcast, yet he had first requested a smaller closing appearance for his wife. She would not speak, but she would still stand beside him. That compromise had been rejected by the wider planning group, the small circle of royals and senior staff responsible for shaping the final program. William had drawn the hardest line. The prince said Catherine would not appear in a production where her service was treated as a threat to another woman's position. If the palace reduced or weakened her contribution, he would withdraw it entirely. Faced with a visible split between his wife and heir, the king accepted Camilla's complete removal. Camilla leaned closer and asked for every name. She wanted to know who had voted against restoring her place, who had remained silent, and who had decided the monarchy could move forward without her. Charles had admitted his part, but the final decision had been shaped elsewhere, inside a small circle that now held more authority over the monarchy's future than Camilla had ever imagined. The Queen's removal had not been decided by one angry prince or one nervous communications official. It emerged from a private consultation involving Charles, William, Anne, the private secretary, and the broadcast director. Each person entered the discussion with a different concern, yet they reached the same conclusion. Camilla's appearance had become a risk. The most devastating detail was not that she had been excluded. It was that almost no one inside the room had argued for her return. Charles still held the final authority, but even the king could not shape the program alone. The private secretary, the monarch's senior official responsible for coordinating royal business, had to balance family wishes with public consequences. William, Catherine, communications staff, and household advisors all had to cooperate. Without that unity, the Christmas message would collapse before it reached the nation. The palace feared one outcome above all others. Any hint of rivalry between Camilla and Catherine could dominate the coverage and bury the king's words beneath stories of jealousy and succession. A broadcast meant to reassure millions would instead become evidence of a divided family. That danger made the decision feel less like punishment and more like containment. Anne understood the cost. The Princess Royal removed her glasses, placed them beside the confidential memo, and looked directly at Charles. She told him that affection could not be allowed to weaken judgment. Her voice remained steady, but sorrow sat beneath every word. She knew the advice would wound her brother, and she gave it anyway. Charles asked whether removing his wife would look cruel. The monarch sounded less like a sovereign in that moment, and more like a husband surrounded by people who had already reached their verdict. William answered without hesitation. The prince said allowing the program to become a contest between two women would be crueler to the crown, crueler to Catherine, and ultimately crueler to Camilla herself. Catherine had never demanded the removal. The princess privately offered, during a recorded conversation with William, to surrender her own segment, if it would prevent further conflict. He refused. The future king insisted that she should not be punished because another family member feared her growing role. Her restraint only strengthened his position. Anne then proposed the final structure. The king would deliver the main address alone. Catherine would keep her charitable contribution. A brief closing sequence would feature the direct line of succession, meaning those family members next in line to inherit the throne. The plan was clean, controlled, and devastating. It left no natural place for Camilla. Staff approved the changes and moved quickly. Christmas schedules shifted. Seating plans changed. Publicity material was rewritten. The Queen soon realized that the decision was no longer limited to one speech. Her voice had vanished from the broadcast, and now her place within the wider Christmas program was beginning to disappear with it. The palace moved quickly after the decision. A rehearsal was canceled. Photographs were rearranged. A chair intended for Camilla was removed from the broadcast room. None of these actions appeared dramatic on paper, yet together, they delivered an unmistakable message. Christmas would proceed without her visible participation. Behind palace doors, she stopped answering calls from the communications office and refused to attend the next family briefing. For the first time, Her anger gave way to something more painful: complete isolation. Staff removed the Queen's script, canceled her recording appointment, and rewrote the press notes. They also changed the final family sequence to center Charles, William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. That sequence mattered because it would show the nation not only the reigning monarch, but the direct line expected to carry the crown forward. Camilla's absence would therefore feel deliberate, not accidental. Her aides received no clear answer about what she intended to do next. The private household, meaning the staff who managed her personal schedule and daily duties, began preparing different plans for Christmas lunch, the church walk, and the evening gathering. Every department needed an alternative, because one missing royal could alter security, seating, transport, and public expectations. Camilla entered the recording room after everyone had gone. The Queen Consort saw the empty space where her chair had stood and stopped. A faint mark remained on the carpet. She touched it with the tip of her shoe, then stood without speaking. The removal had become physical. She was no longer staring at a deleted line. She was staring at the place the palace had decided she would not occupy. Charles tried to reach her before the silence hardened. The king sent a handwritten note, asking her to attend dinner and speak with him privately. She read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it inside a drawer. She did not destroy it. That small act revealed that her anger had not erased the marriage, but it had made forgiveness feel distant. Camilla then considered withdrawing from every remaining Christmas event. Her private secretary prepared a statement saying she was suffering from exhaustion. Releasing it would have transformed an internal dispute into a public rupture, because her absence from church and family gatherings would invite immediate questions about division inside the monarchy. Catherine reached out before that decision was made. The Princess of Wales left a recorded message explaining that she had never sought to replace anyone, and was willing to meet face to face. Camilla listened once, then she played it again. Still, she offered no reply. Charles understood that another note would fail. The monarch decided to abandon palace procedure and go to her alone, without aides, files, or authority standing between them. The institution had made its decision, but the family's survival now depended on a conversation in which neither crown nor title could protect them. That evening, Charles entered Camilla's sitting room alone. He carried no red box, no revised program, and no prepared explanation. She remained beside the window and did not invite him to sit. For several moments, husband and wife faced one another without the protection of ceremony. The king then admitted what he had been unable to say inside his office. He had approved the removal because he feared losing control of both his family and the future of his reign. Charles closed the door gently. The red box, a locked case used to carry official state papers, remained elsewhere. No secretary stood nearby. No advisor waited outside with language designed to soften the truth. He asked Camilla to hear him, not as the sovereign, but as the man who had failed to warn his wife before the palace acted. The Windsor confrontation had frightened him more than he admitted. Charles said Christmas had become a test of whether personal insecurity would control the monarchy's public message. If the family could not separate private fear from public duty, the speech would expose weakness instead of unity. That mattered because the broadcast was meant to reassure the country, while the direct line of succession depended on William and Catherine appearing steady, rather than divided. Camilla finally turned toward him. The Queen Consort said losing the broadcast had not wounded her most. The deeper pain came from discovering that the family had discussed her, judged her, and reached a decision while she remained outside the room. She could survive losing several minutes of airtime. She did not know whether she could forgive being treated like a problem instead of a partner. Charles accepted the blow. The king admitted he should have spoken before the revised schedule reached the communications staff. He had avoided the confrontation because he hoped the decision might be softened. Instead, his silence turned it into an ambush. Camilla had entered expecting approval and left feeling erased. Camilla then revealed, through the unsigned statement resting on the side table, how close she had come to retaliation. Her secretary had prepared a public withdrawal citing exhaustion. Releasing it would force the palace to explain why she had vanished from every Christmas event and would expose the family rupture to the world. Silence returned. Then she picked up the page. Camilla tore the statement in half. The Queen said she would attend Christmas privately and would not demand that her segment be restored. She was not forgiving the process. She was refusing to let her humiliation destroy the entire family. Charles exhaled, but neither of them mistook restraint for peace. One final act remained: 4 decames. Camilla agreed to contact Catherine before the program aired, and that conversation would decide whether her retreat looked bitter or became an act of unexpected dignity. For the first time since the crisis began, Camilla stopped fighting for the missing words and began deciding what her silence would mean. By Christmas morning, the revised program was no longer a palace secret. The absence was visible before anyone explained it. Camilla did not introduce the king, did not appear beside him at the closing, and did not occupy the position viewers had expected. Instead, Catherine spoke briefly about children carrying burdens beyond their years, while Charles delivered a solemn appeal for service over status. Within minutes, the broadcast became a national judgment on family, duty, and the price of belonging to the crown. Charles delivered the principal address alone. The king spoke directly about responsibility, compassion, and the duty to place service above personal recognition. Catherine followed in a separate recorded segment before the closing sequence, centered on the direct line of succession, the family members next, in order to inherit the throne. That structure mattered, because it quietly separated the present reign from the future waiting behind it. The palace released a disciplined statement within minutes. Officials called the format a creative decision designed to highlight service across generations. They made no mention of Windsor, the deleted segment, or the confrontation that had forced the change. The language was calm because any admission of conflict would turn a private wound into an official crisis. Camilla watched beside Charles after Christmas lunch. The Queen held a teacup as Catherine's message began, and her fingers tightened around it. She did not leave. She did not speak. The monarch beside her remained still, understanding that every sentence from the princess carried the emotional place his wife had expected to occupy. Catherine had telephoned earlier that morning. The princess told Camilla she had never wanted the broadcast to become a symbol of one woman replacing another. She explained the pain directly during that private call and said she would have stepped aside if doing so had protected the family. The older royal quietly accepted the words, though acceptance did not erase humiliation. The public noticed everything. Commentators compared the final sequence with earlier Christmas broadcasts and asked whether the monarchy's emotional center had begun shifting toward William and Catherine. The prince appeared nowhere as a challenger, yet his influence seemed to stand behind every editorial choice. His silence became almost as powerful as the speech itself. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered beneath large screens replaying the address. One newspaper at a nearby stand carried the headline, "The King Speaks Alone," above an image of Charles without his wife. That single front page captured the entire crisis. Authority remained with him, but something beside him had vanished. Camilla now faced one final decision. The afternoon church walk was approaching, and her arrival or absence would become the image by which the crisis was remembered. The nation had seen the empty space beside the king. Camilla's next step would decide whether that space represented defeat, division, or deliberate sacrifice. Camilla could have remained behind closed doors and allowed her absence to condemn the family that had removed her. Instead, shortly before the Christmas church walk, she entered the gathering room dressed for the public appearance. Conversation stopped. Charles rose first. Catherine watched carefully from across the room while William remained beside his children. The Queen did not demand an apology or reclaim the speech. She simply told them she would walk with the family because Christmas should not become another battlefield. Camilla had made her final choice. The Queen consort would attend the church walk, the traditional public journey made by the royal family to Christmas service. But her deleted broadcast segment would remain gone. The palace would not restore it, rewrite history, or pretend the decision had been reversed. Her return was not a victory. It was an acceptance of consequence. Charles remained the central voice of the monarchy, but the balance around him had changed. The king still represented the present reign, while William and Catherine now carried the authority of what came next. Their growing roles mattered, because the crown could not depend only on tradition. It also needed public trust, continuity, and a future people could recognize. Camilla understood that demanding visibility at the cost of unity would only deepen her defeat. The Queen crossed the room and approached Catherine. She thanked the Princess of Wales for calling earlier that morning. Catherine answered quietly that she had never considered the broadcast a victory, and had never wanted another woman's humiliation attached to her own service. The exchange was brief, but it ended the most dangerous part of their conflict. Camilla then turned to Charles. She told her husband she would stand beside him publicly, but he must never again allow palace procedure to deliver a personal betrayal on his behalf. The monarch accepted the rebuke without defending himself. He knew she was not forgiving the ambush. She was choosing not to destroy him with it. William stepped forward next. The prince said her appearance would protect the king from humiliation and prevent the family from looking broken before the nation. Camilla replied that she was doing it for the family, not for the program. The future king did not apologize, and she did not ask him to surrender his position. Their disagreement survived, but open warfare ended. Camilla later stepped from the church beside Charles, neither leading the family nor hiding behind it. Catherine followed with William and the children. The formation revealed the monarchy's settled reality. The present reign remained intact, while the future stood clearly behind it. Her removal from the Christmas speech was a defeat of influence, yet her refusal to retaliate prevented that defeat from becoming destruction. Camilla could no longer control the direction of the crown, but she could still choose dignity over resentment. The speech went forward without her voice, but Christmas ended with the family walking together, and that final act transformed Camilla's exclusion from an act of humiliation into a reluctant acceptance of where the monarchy was heading. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.